Just as things were settling down, an edict arrived from the capital. Prince Yun was ordered to return and deliver a report on the war to the emperor, with the promise of a reward for his victory. Yun found the timing unusual. His last orders had clearly instructed him to remain at the border, but he brushed aside his doubts and prepared for the journey. The next day, Yun departed with Shola and a group of his most loyal soldiers. As soon as they ventured beyond Linsu province, they were ambushed by the Crown Prince and a battalion of soldiers. The Crown Prince stepped forward, accusing Yun of abandoning his post without authorization, a grave offense punishable by death. Yun produced the edict summoning him to the capital, but the Crown Prince dismissed it as a forgery and added the charge of falsifying an imperial order. "You've committed treason, brother," the Crown Prince sneered, his tone laced with malice. Without warning, the Crown Prince ordered his soldiers to attack. Chaos erupted as Yun's men fought valiantly. Yun turned to Shola, urging her to flee on horseback with some soldiers while he held the battalion off. But she stood firm, her voice resolute. "I won't leave you. Don't even try to make me." Seeing the determination in her eyes, Yun relented and mounted the horse with her. Rallying his soldiers, he led an effort to break through the enemy's lines, hoping to reach the safety of Linsu. If they could make it back to the city, Yun knew he had the forces to hold their ground, at least temporarily. While he formulated a plan, spotting a gap in the enemy formation, Yun seized the moment. With Shola holding tightly to him, he spurred the horse into a desperate gallop. His only thought was to ensure Shola's safety. As Linsu's gates came into view, a sharp whistle cut through the air. An arrow struck Yun in the side, tearing through his armor. The shot had come from the Crown Prince. Yun's grip on the reins faltered as pain coursed through him. "Yun, you're hurt!" Shola exclaimed, her voice quivering with fear. "I'm fine," he said through gritted teeth, though his ragged breaths betrayed his words. The city gates loomed closer, but Yun's strength was fading rapidly. He leaned heavily against Shola, his vision blurring. Shola shouted desperately to the guards to open the gates. Recognizing their wounded prince, the city's soldiers sprang into action, throwing the gates wide and closing ranks to repel the Crown Prince's battalion, till the gates were safely shut again. As they crossed into the safety of Linsu, Yun slumped forward, unconscious. Shola cried out, panic gripping her. "Someone get a doctor! Now!" Yun was rushed to the governor's manor, his loyal soldiers forming a protective barrier around the building. Outside, the city's soldiers braced themselves as the Crown Prince's forces pressed forward, determined to breach the gates. Inside the governor's manor, Shola stayed by Yun's side as doctors and healers worked tirelessly to save him. They managed to stop the bleeding and dress his wound, but their faces were grim as they emerged from the room. One of them approached Shola, speaking softly. "The arrow struck vital organs, and he's lost too much blood. There's nothing more we can do." Their words felt like a knife to her heart. They left the room, leaving her alone with Yun. Shola clutched his hand tightly, tears streaming down her face. His breathing was shallow, his complexion pale, yet he managed a faint, reassuring smile. "I couldn't save you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Why couldn't I save you? After everything we've been through? Why is the end still the same?" Yun's weak fingers moved with great effort to wipe away her tears. "Shola," he said, his voice hoarse and barely audible. "The Crown Prince wants my life, not yours. If you go with him, he won't harm you, for the sake of the Alliance. As long as you're safe, I'll die with no regrets." Shola shook her head fiercely. "You can't leave me. Not now. Not like this. I love you." His dim eyes brightened for a fleeting moment. "I love you too, my darling," he whispered. "I know I promised I'd come back to you safe, but it seems I'll have to break that promise too." Yun's gaze lingered on her face, as if committing every detail to memory. Then his hand slipped from her grip, falling limply to his side, and his chest stilled. "No!" Shola screamed, shaking him as if sheer will could bring him back. She collapsed next to him, her cries echoing through the room and drowning out the distant clamor of soldiers scrambling to fortify the city. Grief consumed her, the weight of it pressing down on her. The sounds of battle outside became muffled, like she was submerged underwater. Her chest tightened, her vision dimmed, and finally, everything went black. When Shola opened her eyes again, she was greeted by bright fluorescent lights. The hum of machinery filled the air. She blinked, disoriented, and realized she was lying in a hospital bed. Her pillow was damp with tears, her body trembling. The vivid memory of Yoon's final moments haunted her, the pain fresh and raw. A nurse entered the room, her expression kind. "You're awake. How are you feeling?" Shola didn't answer. She was still trying to make sense of her surroundings. "You were hit by a truck while crossing the road," the nurse explained gently. "Fortunately, the driver slowed down in time. The impact wasn't fatal, but you've been unconscious for days." Doctors arrived shortly after to check her vitals, their voices distant and formal. When they left, Shola closed her eyes, tears flowing silently. Was it all just a dream? No, it couldn't have been. Yoon was more real to her than anyone she had ever known. Over the next few days, her body began to recover, but her mind remained trapped in Lindo. Friends and colleagues visited her, offering support, but their words were a blur. 2 weeks later, she was discharged from the hospital. She returned to her routine, trying to rediscover herself as Shola the translator, not Princess Shola, the wife of Prince Yoon. She received a call from her agent, who informed her that the author of the book had regained consciousness 2 weeks ago and was ready to discuss the story. Though she wanted nothing more than to leave it all behind, she resolved to meet him, if only to confront him and demand answers about why he had written such a tragic ending. As she sat in the coffee shop, waiting, the door opened and the author walked in. "Miss Shola, it's a pleasure to finally meet you," he said warmly. Her coffee cup slipped from her grasp, shattering on the floor as she froze in shock. He looked exactly like Yoon. "Are you all right, miss?" he asked with concern. "I'm Long Yoon, the author." Her eyes welled with tears. He seemed so distant. This couldn't be her Yoon. "I'm sorry," she managed, her voice trembling. "You look like someone I know." Suddenly, he smiled, a familiar, boyish grin that tugged at her heart. "Then I wonder if you miss him as much as he misses you," he said softly. Shola's breath hitched, that look in his eyes. It was Yoon. He opened his arms wide, and she flew into them, sobbing uncontrollably as all the emotions she had suppressed came rushing to the surface. "It's okay, my love. I came back like I promised," Yoon whispered, tears streaking down his own face. They clung to each other, oblivious to the stares of other patrons, until a waitress approached, a little upset. "Excuse me, but you're disturbing the other guests." Embarrassed, they quickly apologized, paid the bill, and left the coffee shop. Outside, they found a quiet park bench, and Yoon began to explain. "When I woke up from the coma, I had all the memories of our time together," he said. "But I convinced myself it was just a vivid dream, until I saw you today." Shola looked at him, her heart still racing from disbelief. "But why did you write such a heartbreaking story? Why give your name to a side character who dies so tragically?" Yoon's expression turned somber, because, like Prince Yoon, I lost my mother as a child. My father remarried, and my relationship with him and my stepbrother deteriorated over time. The world felt like a dark and lonely place to me. Tragic stories were all I knew how to write. But meeting you has taught me how to love again and see the beauty in life. Shola took his hands in hers, her voice firm but tender. "You're not alone anymore, Yoon. You have me. I'm your family now." He smiled, his eyes glistening. "Then, will you be my wife once again?" "I already am," Shola replied, beaming with joy. He pulled her into an embrace, and they stayed there for hours, savoring the feeling of being reunited. 3 months later, Yoon's book was released in both Mandarin and English. The story had been rewritten to give Prince Yoon and Princess Shola the happy ending they deserved. In the present, Yoon made peace with his father and stepbrother. Not long after, he and Shola were married in a beautiful ceremony, surrounded by both their families. A year later, they welcomed twins, a boy and a girl, into their lives. Together, they spent their days writing beautiful stories and raising their children, cherishing every moment of their hard-earned happiness.